Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to part one of my tutorial for the forms coding assignment. In part one, we're going to uh, we're going to create the create pages. Okay, so right now for each of the model classes, we have a list and we have a detail page. Okay. Well, that's not all the CRUD functionality, okay? We still need a create, an update, and a delete. So in part one, we're doing create. Um, I'm just going to take a peek at the instructions here. So here are the instructions for part one. So together, we're going to work on the create pages for instructor and section. And then after we do that, on your own, you're going to do course, semester, student registration. And there is a checklist to follow when we do each of the pages. Okay? It's 6 parts. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a model form subclass in forms.py. Now, we don't have that module yet, so we're going to have to create forms.py before we create the first one. We're going to create a template. We have a template for each of our forms. Okay. We're going to have to create a URL pattern. Okay. The fourth thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a view, okay, a class-based view for the create page that we're working on. The fifth thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the list template. So for the first one, it'll be like the list instructor template, and we're going to add a link for creating a new instructor. And then the sixth thing we're going to do is that we're going to test. So this 6-part checklist is what we're going to use for each of the classes. Okay. Together, we're going to use this for instructor and section. And then on your own, you're going to follow it for course, semester, student registration. So let's get started. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create the forms.py module, and we want to put in a model class for instructor. So let's do that. So we don't have a forms.py yet, so it goes into the course info app. So we're going to highlight course info and click on new Python file, and it's just called forms. Okay, enter. So now we're editing forms.py. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the first of these, the instructor form, into my code. Okay, so here's some code that I already have in my already baked version. Okay, so it looks like it needs some imports. Okay, it needs to import model form from forms. So let's get an import for that. We're just going to hover and then click import this name. And we want Django.forms. Okay, so that's the right import. And then we need the import for instructor. We're going to hover over that and pick import. And we have that. So, and then we have one error. We need a blank line as the last line of the file that gets rid of that. So what does this look like? Well, this the class that we're creating, Instructor form, it's a subclass of model form. Okay, so we don't have to put all the code together for a form class. We're able to subclass sort of a template-oriented superclass, model form. Okay, and what do we need to provide? Well, if we have an internal class called meta, which holds metadata about the form class, okay, and we have to tell it the model class that the form is going to be based upon, and that's of course instructor. And then we have to tell it the fields that we want to process. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but the simplest is to just say you want all the fields that are in the model class. You want them all included on the form. And that's this under all value that we have right here. Okay? So what else can we put into a form class? Well, one of the things that we often would like to do is to clean the data as it comes into the system. Well, what might need to be cleaned? Well, one common problem that users have is that they accidentally put like a space before or after the information that they type in. And they can't see it. It's not like it's a visible character. So since this is such a common problem, it's a common thing to do in web application to strip off leading and trailing white space characters from the field that was entered. How do you do that? Well, you call strip and it strips them off. But what are you calling strip on? And what are all these methods we've added into the class? Well, you can optionally provide a method to clean each of the fields. And the name of the method is clean underscore field name. So we have a clean for first name, we're providing a clean for last name, and we're providing a clean for disambiguator. Okay? And we're going to return the value that we want to be in that field when we're done. Okay? And so we're taking the value that came in on the form and we're putting it through strip. Okay. So why, if we're talking about the data that came in on the form, is the data in this thing called cleaned data first name? Well, this is a dictionary that's holding the values that came in with the form. Okay. We say that the input that came in from the HTML form has been bound to the form class. And what has happened here is the first bit of cleaning, the automatic cleaning that goes on to flag problems like code injection hacks and those kinds of things, that's already been done to the text that was typed into the form. So it's gone through kind of phase one of the processing, okay, and it's been put into a structure called cleaned underscore data, and we get each of the values out by using its key name, and the key name for the first name field is the name of the field. So we're going to pull that out and call strip on it. Okay, so if it's got white space in the beginning or in the end, well, that will be consumed, and we'll just have the clean characters when we're done. If it didn't have, well, we'll just have the characters we began with. There's nothing destructive about strip, so it's a safe thing to use whether you needed it or not. So we're doing that for first name, we're doing that for last name. Now this third field is an optional field, and in Django apps, when you have an optional field, you typically populate the field with an empty string. Okay, so how do we know if this is populated or not? Well, if it hasn't been populated, it has a length of 0. So we check. So we say if it has a length of 0, okay, return it as is. Okay, that's going to, if it has a length of 0, it's the empty string, so we're going to return it as is, the empty string. Else, we're going to call strip on it. So we only try to strip the disambiguator if it really has been populated. If not, we simply return the empty string that's already there. Okay? And I was kind of acting like we were doing a return on lines 19 and 21, but what we're actually doing is we're populating the variable result, and then we return result. Okay? So this is going to do the job. If you look in the readings for the current week, there's some good discussion of what the form objects are, what the form classes do, and kind of how they work. All right. So I recommend that if you'd like to have a deeper understanding of Django forms. Okay, so we've done the first thing from the checklist. What's the second thing? Well, we need a template call. It's going to be called for instructor. This one's going to be called instructor form. Okay, so I'm going to copy that in from my already created project. Okay. And let me show that to you. Instructor form. And that goes with the rest of the template. So I'm going to paste it in. Instructor form. Okay, and you can see what we have here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on in a list of starter files. Okay. And I'm just going to pause here and make a note to myself to make sure that you get that in the starter files. Okay, and we're back. So this is a typical template file. Okay, so it extends base.html. It has a title block. It has a content block. The title is create instructor. That makes sense. And then within the content, we have a form. Okay. And within the form, we have 3 typical form markup parts. The first is on the form element itself. We've got two attributes, action and method. So on a typical HTML form, okay, what we code into the action attribute is the URL that's going to handle the form input, okay? And what we code into the method is the HTTP method that we're going to use. Now, it's common to use the method post for forms, and that's what we're going to use here. If you look at the way we're going to form the URL, well, we're going to do it the way that we form the rest of the URLs in our Django app. We have some template code. We're calling the URL function, and we want to build the URL based upon the create URL pattern. Okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, what else is in here that's just plain old HTML? Well, the button element is a plain old HTML element. Okay, and we say type equal submit, so it's a submit button. And the text that's going to be on the button is create instructor. Okay, well, that looks good. And then inside, we've got two parts we haven't seen before. We have this template code that has Csrf Token in it, and this is a special instruction to Django to insert a token into the page that guards against cross-site request forgeries. Okay, so this is an anti-hacking feature. So every form that you have in your system should have this token code on it. Okay, and now we have this last thing, form as P. Okay, this is Django magic at its best. So typically, if we were going to code an HTML form by hand, we would have to code all of the fields. So we would have to code an HTML element for each of the fields, and we'd need a bunch of template tags to handle that. Instead of manually creating the HTML form, we're telling Django this: on the basis of the information you have about the model class and the form, generate a form, okay? Generate all the code that we're going to need on this form. Typically, it's going to generate code for each of the fields that are on the form, which is each of the fields that are in the model class. Now, what's good about this? What's good about this is that it is automatic, and it's especially helpful if you use this automatic approach to creating the form. Anytime you go back and add another field or two or three to your model class, as long as you do a migration for the changes that you did for the model class, the next time you use this form, it's going to know the new fields that are in the model class. So this really saves time when you're kind of adding and taking fields away from tables, which, in the kind of early days of designing a system, I think this happens fairly frequently. Okay. Now, this form as P, the HTML that it generates is based on the paragraph element. So that's what the P is. Now, do we have to do this kind of magical form creation? No, we don't. You can look at the readings and you can find the code. If you want to control either the layout or the styling in such a way that this kind of automatic form SP approach doesn't work for you, well, you're free to look in the readings and code this by hand. And when I say this, I mean for your own project, okay? For the EZU project, we're always going to be using form SP. Okay, so that's what the code does, right? That's the template that we're going to use for the form. Okay, so what do we have so far? We have done 1 and 2. We haven't done the URL pattern yet. That's number 3. Let's go do that. Okay, so we're going to find urls.py and open it up. Okay, and so we want to enter instructor create. It's going to be the one that we're going to do. And I'm just going to go over to my already coded portion and copy over the code for instructor create. And I tend to try to keep these things in a reasonable order, okay? So typically I put these in the order in which we've added them into the system. So the first thing that we did was we have the pattern for the instructor list. Then we had the pattern for the instructor detail. This instructor create is the third one. I just put it in here as the third one. The URL this string is going to have instructor and then /create/. Okay, it's going to use an instructor create view. We haven't made that yet, so we're going to get to that in a second. And then the name that's associated with the pattern is instructor create URL pattern. So we're going to need an import here. Okay, now when you just hover over this, it doesn't see the class because we haven't created it yet. So you don't get an easy thing to click on to do the import. So what I usually do here is I just go up to the top and I add it at the bottom. So I just say of my imports from views, I want to import instructor create and put a comma after that. So you'll see that has a red underline because there is no instructor create class in views.py. But if you go back to the pattern that we created, we have cleared the error that we had here. Okay, because it sees the import. Now the import is broken, but we've moved ahead. So now we're ready for the next step on the checklist, which is 4, create the class-based view. It's the name of the model class and create. So it's going to be instructor create. So let's go to views.py, open that up. And again, we're going to put it in the same order. So it's going to go right after instructor detail. All right. And mine, I'm going to copy this from my already coded version. Okay. And we've got instructor create. Okay. Let's see that. All right. So it's called instructor create. It's a subclass of view. Well, that's what we've been doing for the rest of the views. It has this other thing that's its subclass of, and I'll get to that in a minute. And it has a reference to the instructor form class that we created in forms.py, but we need an import for that. So let's come down here and click get an import. Okay, that's fine. And then the template that we're going to use is course info instructor form.html. That's fine. What's this object create mixin? Well, it turns out in Python, okay, a class can be a subclass of more than one superclass. Okay, so the view class is a true superclass. It has it's a proper class that does everything that you expect a view class to do. We have another kind of superclass in Python that's called a mixin, and typically spelled M-I-X-I-N, and it gives the subclass a handful of properties. Okay, it gives it a capability that it didn't otherwise have. Okay, and this is a typical pattern for Python class hierarchies. Okay, so let's look at object create mixin, and then we'll see what kind of capabilities are added to instructor create by virtue of saying that it's a subclass of object create mixin. So where's object create mixin going to go? It's going to go into utils.py. Okay, and I'm going to give you a copy of that in your starter files. So let's just copy this out of my already coded version. So utils.py goes in the course info app. So we copy paste it into the course info app. And let's look at it. So it's interesting. Let's see. It's got two variables. Okay, it has a class called object create mixin. That's the thing that we just subclassed. Okay, we've got two fields that we are setting: form class and template name. And then this implements two of the methods that we typically expect to find implemented in a class-based view. It implements a get and it implements a post. Okay, so let's review again what get and post are. Okay, get and post are HTTP methods. Okay, so it turns out that the HTTP protocol on which the web is really based has more methods than get and post, and I forget the number, but it's high. It's like 8 or 10. The ones that we use all the time are get and post. Okay, what's a get? Well, when we click on a link in the browser or we type an address into the address bar, it creates a get for the URL in question. So if we got here by either clicking on a link or typing the address into the address bar, then we're going to link up to the get code, because the HTTP request that comes in is going to be a get. Okay, how do we get a post? The way we get a post is we fill out a form and we click on the submit button. Okay, we do have a form, an instructor form here, that has a submit button. So what's going to happen is when we click on this button on the form, that is what is going to be, that request that comes through, that's going to be caught as a post. Oh, and I forgot to show, if we go back here, what's the method? Post. That's how we get it to say post. Okay, we actually say in the form that when you click a button in this form, we want to send a request to the server that's a post. That's why when we come back in this code, we're going to have a post. Okay, so it turns out that for a particular URL that's used for creating a row in a table, there are two things that you can do. When you send a get to the server, okay, typically the application sends back a blank form. Okay, when you send a post, it knows it has a filled out form and it processes the form. So it's going to turn out that all of our create views are going to do essentially the same thing. Okay, if they get a get, they send back a blank form. If they get a post, they try to apply the data that's in the form. Okay, we're not going to code these explicitly on each of the views that we have for create. Instead, we're just going to say that they subclass object create mix in, and this code is going to be inherited by the class. So if we go back to views, okay, we have this instructor create view. It says that it's a subclass of object create mix in, which we still have to do an import for. Okay, now that's there. So even though we don't see the methods implemented here, because by virtue of the fact that we are subclassing object create mix in, we have inherited a get and a post. Okay, well, let's go back to them. What do our get and post actually do? Okay, so for the get, we just have to send back the form. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we do it with the template and the form. Okay, well, aren't the template and the form going to be different for each one of the tables that we're doing? Yes, they are. Now, one of the ways that you can use a superclass is that when you subclass it, you can override the values that are set in the superclass. So the value for form class is none, and the value for template name is empty string. But when we subclassed it, we said, oh, our form class is instructor form, and our template name is instructorform.html. So this is going to be known to this code in utils.py. So if it's a get, we send back the blank form as a response. If it's a post, what do we do now? Well, we have to process the form. Okay, So we call the form class request.post. Okay, that sends us back what we call a bound form. This is a form that has the data from the HTML form bound into it. Okay, and then we call isValid. That's where the first amount of cleaning and processing is going to go on. Okay, uh, and we we have to do a save. Okay, so we want to create a new object. Okay, so we do a save from the form. Okay, we get the new object that's now a database object, and we redirect to the database object. This is going to take us to the detail page for whatever we have. So in the case of instructor, it's going to take us to the instructor detail page. So if we have a valid form, we create a new database object, and we use that database object to go to the detail page for that. So this is an instructor, right? So we'll go to the instructor detail page. Else, if it's not valid, okay, we're going to render, okay, and we have to pass the request, the template, and then the bound form. Okay, now this form has error messages in it. This is the bound form. This is the one that's been, this is a form object. Form objects are containers of a sort. This one has the data from the original HTML form in it. It also has any error messages that came from the validation in it too. So when we display this, which is what we're doing here, we'll get a page, a form page will come back complete with error messages. Okay, so we really have three actions that we could take. If we got a get, we send back the blank form. Okay, then we start to process the form if we have a post, and if it's a valid form, then we save the data in the database and we go to the detail page. If it's an invalid form, we send a form page back to the browser, including the error messages. Okay, now what's cool is that this common code is going to be inherited by all the create views that we're going to create, such that if we go back to views.py, this is pretty small. Okay, all that we need to do within the class is override form class with the name of the real form class, and override template name with the name of the real template, and all the rest of the work is done by the code that we inherit from object create mixin. It's a little long-winded, but there's a lot of code there. Okay, so we've done that. Are we done? No, we've got one more thing we have to do before we can test. We want to add the create new model class link code to the list page. So we're on instructors, so we have to get instructor list, and we need to add the code for the new link into that. Okay, so let's go to instructor list right here. Okay, and we're going to want to put a link right under the name instructor list, or right under that H2. So let me open this up on my other machine. Okay. And I'm going to copy this over, and you guys are going to have to type it in. Okay. Okay, so we have a div that's going to hold a link. So right now, our button for creating a new one of these is a link. Okay. Not really a button, although we're going to render it as a button when we get, by the time we get to the end of EZU. The styling that we're going to give this link is it's going to be a button. In the short run, it's going to look like a link like every other link. So we're going to have a link, and the text is going to be create new instructor. It's going to be above the list of instructors, and the URL associated with this is course info instructor create URL pattern. Okay, so now we should have all the changes. We've done all 5 of the things on the checklist, and then the 6th thing is that we have to test. So let's test. Okay. Now, I'm going to go up to Tools and open up the Manage.py task. Okay, and I'm going to run the server. Okay, that's there. Okay, so let's go here. So our landing page is section list. Let's click on instructors. Okay, and as you can see, I have a create new instructor link. Let's click on that. Very good. And let's create a new instructor. And let's say the name of our new instructor is going to be Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein. Okay. Maybe we can make this a little bit bigger so we can see. So I put in Albert Einstein. I don't need a disambiguator yet, but we probably want to test that field as well. But we'll do that in a minute. So create instructor. Well, there's the detail page. We went to the right page. Let's list instructors. There's Albert Einstein right at the top of the list. Let's try to create a duplicate. It should catch it. Okay. So first name, Albert. Last name, Einstein. Okay. Oh, and the other thing we haven't tested is the trimming. So let's put a bunch of spaces in front of Albert, 1 space after Albert, 1 space before Einstein, several spaces after Einstein. Okay. And now let's try to create the instructor. No, it's a duplicate. It's already there. Okay, so before it did the comparison, it did the trimming, which was pretty cool. Although it left the text here in its untrimmed state. Okay, so let's back up and see where we want to go. I think it would be good to test the disambiguator again. So let's create 2 instructors. One called Fritz Smith, and the disambiguator is going to be, this is the Fritz Smith who was trained at Rutgers. So I'm going to put a couple of spaces in front of Rutgers and a couple of spaces after. don't know why it puts that period there. Something weird about my browser. So create instructor. Okay, Fred Smith Rutgers. It trimmed the spaces off there really well. Okay, and then let's go back to instructors and try to add another Fred Smith Rutgers. Fred space Smith Rutgers space. Okay, so I did a lot of stuff to test the trimming. No, we already have the one like that. Oh yeah, that's the Fred Smith at Rutgers. And let's say the other Fred Smith trained at the University of Illinois, so we're going to say Illinois and create that, and that worked. And I go to the instructors, and I have two Fred Smiths, one who trained at Illinois and one who trained at Rutgers. So that seems to behave exactly like I wanted it to behave. No problem at all. Okay. What do we do next? Well, according to my instructions, we should do the same thing for section. Okay, we're going to do all four things. We're going to put the code into forms.py. Okay, we're going to create a form template. We're going to create a URL pattern. We're going to create a class-based view. Okay, and then we're going to put the link into the list. Okay, and this time we're going to do it all for a section. So let's go do it. Close this. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a form. So let's go to forms.py. Okay, and right now we just have an instructor form. Okay, how could we clone that in order to create a section form? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy it right here. Copy. And I'm going to skip 2 blank lines. Okay. And I'm going to change this and say this is section form, our standard way that we clone things. Okay. And of course we have to change the model is not instructor, it's section. Okay. And the fields are all, that's going to be fine. We're going to need an import for section. Import this name. Section model. Okay, that's looking good. I don't know why it says I've got duplicate code, but it does. Okay, now, section form. Does it have these fields? No. What does section have in terms of fields? Well, let's go to the model class and look. Let's go to models.py. Where's section? It's down towards the bottom. Okay. So, the only kind of fields we have to clean are character fields. Okay. Does section have any character fields? Yeah, section name. Okay, so instead of the 3 things that we had for instructor, if we look up at instructor, we'll see that it had 3 character fields, char field, char field, char field, whereas section has just the one, section name. So we're only going to have to clean section name. Okay, well that makes sense. Let's go back to forms.py. Okay, and let's get rid of the last 2 cleaner methods, and let's clone the first one. Okay, so this is not going to be first name, it's going to be section name, section. name, okay, and this one is going to be section name, okay, and it's just going to, is this, going to do the trimming, and that's all we need. So that one's done. All right. Okay. And again, I'm going to refer to my list. What's the next thing? Well, I'm going to need section form .html. Okay. Let's clone that one. So we have instructor form is here. Let's just take instructor form and copy it. So we're going to copy instructor form. We're going to paste it in here. And we're going to change the name to section form. Typical cloning behavior. Okay, it's got section form now. Okay, section form. So up in the title block, we don't want to create an instructor, we want to create a section. Okay, and then down here in the proper HTML form, the action has to refer to section create URL pattern. That sounds good. Okay. And then down here on the button, we want it to say create section. And that's appropriately cloned. Okay, so we've done the second part. Let's look at the third. We want to create the URL pattern. So let's go do that. Let's go to urls.py. Okay, and it turns out I think a good thing to clone into the create URL pattern is the one that creates the list. So we have one for section list, right? Let's just take that one and copy it and come down and put it after section detail. Okay. And we have to, again, we have to expand the URL. It has to end with create slash. Okay. It's not the section list as view, it's section create as view. Okay, that looks good. That's going to need an import, but I'm going to leave that for a second to remember. I come down here and change the name of it because the URL pattern should say section create URL pattern. And now we need an import for section create. Let's go up here, just add it to the list of imports. Section create. All right, let's see how that goes. And again, if we come back down to my URL pattern for section create, because we added the import, we got rid of the red underline on that. We still have one up here because we haven't created the view yet. Okay, what do we do next? Well, we create the view. Okay, so we're going to create a view called section create. Let's do that. And we're going to do that by cloning as well. So let's go to views.py. I didn't want to do that. Okay. Views.py. We have an instructor create. Let's just copy that. Okay. And let's come down and put it right after section detail. Let's put a section create here. Okay, and it's not instructor create, it's section create. Change that to section. It's not instructor form, it's section form. Okay. And that's going to need an import. So we're going to import it. That's good. And then down here, it's not called instructor form, it's called section form. Okay. All right, that looks good. All right, so that's all done. Okay, what's next? Well, we've done 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we have to go into section list and add the link. Okay, so let's find section list. It's right here. Okay, and we're going to put the link right after this H2. Okay, that's where the link's going to go. And how could we come up with the text for it? Well, I'm just going to go to instructor list, and I'm going to copy that that link code that we put into instructor list, and then I'll modify it. Okay, so I'm copying that out of instructor list, and I'm going to put it right after the H2 on section list. And of course, I've got to, I want the URL for section create URL pattern. Okay, that's good. And then we want to say create new section. Pretty good, huh? Okay, that's fine. So let's click off of that text. So now I've done 1 through 5, and now the last thing that we do for each of these is number 6 we're going to test. Okay, so let's test. So we're on sections, right? So we want to create a new section. Let's create a new section of IS455. So we're going to do that, create a new section. I'm going to call it, the section name is going to be called Extra. That's not a proper section name here at Illinois, but it'll do. We'll pick the current semester, 2021 spring. Okay, the course is going to be IS455. Okay, the instructor is going to be Fred Smith from Rutgers. Okay, and then we're going to create the section. Alrighty. Now let's make sure that we're not able to create a duplicate. Okay, so let's go back, create a new section. Section name is going to be called Extra. Okay, the semester is going to be Spring 2021. The course is going to be IS455. Now, I want to tell you that what's considered in whether this is a duplicate or not is the section name, the semester, and the course. Okay. Even if you say you want to use a different instructor, it's going to say that we already have that section. So if I, instead of saying that we want it to be Fred Smith from Rutgers, say it's going to be Mary Smith from UWM, okay, I'm still going to get a duplicate. Okay, section with this semester, course, and section name already exists. Okay, so we caught it. Very good. All right, so you're just about ready to go off on your own and do courses, semesters, students registrations. But before you do it, I want to remind you that if you're working with the same data that I have, you don't have enough data in order to create new semesters. Why is that? Well, if you look at the semesters that we have, we have all three periods, spring, summer, and fall, for 2020 and 2021. And you'll remember that the underlying data are in two tables that we're not including in our app, even though they are part of this uh, Django environment. Well, they're part of the Course Info app, but we're not creating pages for them. Okay, so if we want to add another year, for instance, okay, we need to be able, we need to find a way to enter that year, because I think the only years that we have are 2020 and 2021. It's time to add 2022. Now, how would we do that? Well, we're expecting the administrator of our system to use the admin function. So let's go up and go to admin. Okay, and let's log in with tester. Okay, and you remember we've got periods and years. So the periods are spring, summer, and fall. I don't see that changing very soon. But the years, we've got 2020 and 2021. It's now come time to add 2022. Okay, so let's click add year. Let's add 2022 and save. And now you can see that we have that. So when you go to add another semester, you'll be in the position where you can add spring 2022, and you aren't going to have a problem with duplicates. Okay? So that takes care of that. Alrighty. So it's time for you to work on your own. Okay. Together, we've done instructor and section. And what I want you to do on your own is course, semester, student, registration. Okay. And I'm going to be back for part 2, and I'm going to say bye until then. Bye-bye.